Greetings everyone, Baldus here. In this video I'm once again going through a theory crafted build for Diablo 4 endgame. This one is based around Werewolf and Storm abilities, while exploring a few interesting interactions with legendaries and a unique weapon. Let's start with the Keystone passive, which forms the basis of the build. Earthen Might. Damaging enemies with Earth skills has up to a 5% chance to restore all of your spirit and cause your attacks to be guaranteed critical strikes for 5 seconds. The chances also increase when you deal critical strikes and damage to CC'd enemies. Now you're probably wondering, why would I pick this for a storm based build? Well, let's go up to the gear and let's look at this legendary Mighty Storms aspect. This now makes our Earthen Might key passive also apply to your storm skills. This enables some quite powerful synergy alone, but is also enhanced when using this unique Great Staff of the Crone, which makes Claw become a storm skill and also cast Storm Strike at 120 to 150% normal damage. Now with this we have 2 additional storm skills to help trigger our Earthen Might buff. Now you get the idea, we will move on to the skill tree. So firstly, of course, we would take Claw, including the attack speed buff and chance to attack twice. This may trigger Storm Strike twice, but it is not a definite. And then we also put points into Storm Strike in order to gain the benefits of Immobilized chance and vulnerability. You don't, however, need this skill on your bar as it will trigger automatically. On the next line, we're going to take Shred as our spender, taking the attack speed passive and the critical strike damage passive. Because Earthen Might grants us guaranteed critical strike chance, it synergizes well with Shred. Other passives on this line will also be base crit chance against close enemies, and maximum spirit in order to unlock more damage at the expense of more cost. Onto the next line, we're going to take Earthen Bulwark, melee to gain unstoppable, and also gives us a bit of fortify. We're also going to take Blood Howl. This provides us with a bit of healing, but we mainly want it for the attack speed buff. For this build we really want to stack attack speed, as it is important to cast as many skills as possible in order to trigger Earthen Might buff. Moving on to the next line, we don't take anything in the companion zone, but in this row we want to take Hurricane. This is just another storm skill. When cast, it does damage in an AoE over a duration, helping to increase our chance to proc Earthen Might. We also take a number of passives on this line, including the lightning based ones for storm skills. They just generally increase our damage, make things vulnerable, also increase the duration of Hurricane, and then chance to trigger additional lightning bolts on vulnerable, immobilized or stunned enemies. In this build we have quite a bit of vulnerable uptime, so we should be pretty much maintaining our 20% damage increase. And yeah, we've also got another lightning bolt and then more immobilized chance. We also take this passive to make poison enemies slowed, adding a crowd control effect, and also critical strikes with werewolf skills such as Shred deal 23% of their base damage as poisoning damage. For the ultimate line, we are going to take Cataclysm for this one. This synergizes with this to make it increase duration. But the reason why we take this is, yet again, it's a storm skill, so it's going to help to trigger Earthen Might. The passives just increase the duration further and also apply vulnerability. We also want to take just a single passive here to gain a bit more damage versus elites, and then take all 3 here so that our storm skills deal a bit more damage versus CC'd enemies. Next we can just take this one for increased damage after shapeshifting, so that would add bonus damage to our Shred and auto attacks. And then just one point in here to make shape-shifting fortify us for 1% base life. And then of course finally we take our Earthen Might. So moving on to the gear and the other legendaries I didn't mention. We're going to take a Vigorous Aspect initially. This just applies a flat damage reduction buff while in Werewolf. For the chest armor, we take Aspect of the Crowded Sage. This provides us a nice top-up of a healing when surrounded by enemies. We already mentioned the gloves, which are a must for the build. And then for the pants, we take Aspect of the Mending Stone. The duration of Earthen Bulwark is increased by 6 seconds, and killing an enemy replenishes part of the barrier. This is particularly important in this build as we lack any form of Unstoppable without Earthen Bulwark, so this just helps to maintain that buff so we don't get CC'd. For the boots, we just want to take Critical Strikes, grant more movement speed. Then of course we have the staff. I just want to mention a few things about this staff because the tooltips aren't always accurate in the game. So it says Claw is also a storm skill, but does that mean it's also a nature skill so we can benefit from nature-based passives? Additionally, does it fully remove the werewolf tag or not? If we do by chance keep the werewolf tag, I'd just like to cover something briefly, which could be very powerful. If we have a look at the legendaries, we have this one called Direwolf's Aspect, which now makes Grizzly Rage shapeshift us into a dire werewolf, and we gain some benefits. Then if we pair that with Rampaging Werebeast, so when Grizzly Rage is active, our critical strikes increase our critical damage for the duration. You know, we could start building some real critical damage while also keeping Claw as a storm skill. There's a chance it could be the case, but we'll have to see when we get the release. Moving on, let's have a look at the amulet. So for the amulet, we want the basic skills gain 30% attack speed. Like I mentioned before, we want attack speed so that we can cast Claw and Storm Strike more often, increasing our chance to proc the Earthen Might buff. Then for the first ring, we take Aspect of the Unsatiated. After killing an enemy with Shred, your next werewolf skill generates 30% more spirit and deals 30% increased damage. This pretty much just buffs our Shred damage and generation. For the second ring, we want to take Rune Worker's Conduit. Critical strikes with storm skills that you cast charge the air around you for 2 seconds, causing a lightning bolt to periodically hit enemies in the area. The duration can be extended by critical strikes. And this is good because we're going to be doing a lot of critical strikes because of the Might buff, so we're going to almost have this up permanently. Now let's move on to the Spirit Boons. So for Deer, we're going to take Gift of the Stag for maximum spirit. For Eagle, we're going to take Swooping Attacks for 10% attack speed. For the Wolf, we are going to take Calamity to extend the duration of ultimate skills by 25%. This just adds a bit more duration to Cataclysm, meaning it'll strike more, helping to proc the Might buff. Then finally for the Snake, where we take 2, I'm going to have Overload. So we have a lucky hit chance when dealing lightning damage to cause the target to emit a static discharge, dealing damage to surrounding enemies. Then we take whatever that says, which gives critical strikes with shape-shifting skills, heal for maximum life. Now, finally, let's move on to Paragon Board. I won't go through every passive here, but there will be a link in the description with the full build, so you can go through in your own time. For the glyph on the first board, we take Fulminate, which increases our lightning damage for every 5 dexterity purchased in the area. We also take the other passives for damage and willpower, and also resistant to elements. Moving up to the next board, we will take Thunderstruck for our legendary node. Storm skills deal 30% increased critical strike damage against vulnerable or immobilized enemies. This just adds a bit more damage when we're doing our storm based skills. Nothing too crazy, but what we really want here is the passives that increase critical strike damage, a bit more life, some more critical strike damage, a bit more storm damage there, and a bit of tankiness. Also, for the rare glyph, we want to take Spirit, which increases our core skill critical strike damage by 4% per 5 dexterity in the area. For the next board, the legendary node will be Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 Spirit, you deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. This should be up pretty much all the time, so it's just a nice 30% increased damage buff. For the glyph here, we take Werewolf. For every 5 willpower purchased within range, you deal 2% increased damage while in werewolf form. So this just buffs our shred damage. Other nodes on this tree include a bit more resistance to elements, some more basic and core skill damage, which is good as we're triggering two basic skills with this build, some more maximum spirit and life, and another more maximum spirit and spirit on kill. For the final board, we will take Lust for Carnage as our legendary node. Critical strikes with werewolf skills restore 2 spirit. So if we have good uptime with our Earthen Might buff, which guarantees critical strikes, we're going to be restoring spirit very often, so we should never really have any issues with spirit generation. For the glyph here, we're going to take Fang and Claw, which while in werewolf form increases our damage to close enemies. But what we need here in order to gain this bonus is 40 willpower in the area. This section just about covers it, so that fits in nicely. Another bonus with these glyphs is also it can add to our magic nodes. So this would add another 3% in healing received, or another 2.5% there for werewolf damage. So that pretty much covers it for this build. I mean, it's quite an interesting one. Definitely requires a few legendaries and a unique to really pop off. But there's a few things up for question, and it could be a very strong build. Thanks guys for watching, especially if you went through the full duration. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.